The Galactic Forum had stood for 12,000 years at the heart of the Andromeda sector, a massive station where 300 species came together to settle disputes, forge alliances, and maintain the fragile peace that kept civilization from tearing itself apart. The station itself was a marvel of cooperative engineering, built from the combined technologies of the founding races. Its halls stretched for miles, lined with chambers where delegates argued over trade routes, territorial boundaries, and the countless small grievances that arose when different worlds tried to coexist. Ambassador Chun Wei walked those halls with measured steps, her dark suit immaculate, her expression unreadable. She had represented humanity for 7 years now, ever since Earth had been granted full membership status. Behind her, 3 human aides followed in silence, carrying data tablets and sealed containers. The other species had learned to recognize that silence. It usually meant humanity was about to do something unexpected. The emergency session had been called by the Vorantine Supremacy, one of the oldest and most powerful members of the Forum. Their representative, High Chancellor Vexoth, had spent the last 3 cycles demanding that humanity surrender their colony rights in the Tau Ceti system. The Vorantines claimed ancient territorial privileges, pointing to star charts that supposedly proved their ancestors had surveyed the region millennia ago. Never mind that they had never settled there, never even sent a probe. The charts were enough. According to Forum Law. Chun Wei had listened to 6 hours of legal arguments, historical precedents, and thinly veiled threats. The Vorantines had allies, powerful ones. The crystalline Gen Kar, who controlled the largest banking networks in 3 galaxies. The warlike Krath Dominion, whose fleets made even the most militant species nervous. The soft-spoken but ruthlessly efficient Peltharian Trade Consortium. Together, they formed a bloc that had never lost a major dispute in the Forum's long history. The vote was a formality. Everyone knew how it would go. 300 species and 217 had already signaled their intention to side with the Vorantines. Abstentions numbered 46. That left 37 potential allies for humanity, and even those were wavering. The message was clear: give up Tau Ceti, or face sanctions, blockades, and possible military action. When Chancellor Vexoth finished his closing statement, the chamber fell silent. All eyes turned to the human delegation. Chun Wei stood slowly, straightening her jacket. She walked to the central podium, her footsteps echoing in the vast space. For a long moment, she simply looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of representatives from worlds spanning half the known universe. "We decline," she said simply. A ripple of shock ran through the assembly. The Gen Kar representative actually stood, her crystalline body refracting the chamber lights into dancing rainbows of disbelief. "Ambassador Chun, perhaps you misunderstand the gravity of this situation. The vote is merely a formality at this point. The legal precedent is clear. You cannot simply refuse a forum ruling." Chun Wei smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "I understand perfectly, Representative Ciara, which is why I'm not refusing the ruling. I'm withdrawing humanity from the Galactic Forum, effective immediately." The chamber erupted. Representatives shouted in 300 different languages, their translation devices struggling to keep up with the chaos. Chancellor Vexoth slammed his manipulator appendages against his desk, the sound like thunder. "You cannot. No species has ever withdrawn from the Forum. It would be madness. Economic isolation. Military vulnerability. You would be cutting yourselves off from galactic civilization." "Yes," Chun Wei agreed calmly. "We would. And we are." She gestured to her aides, who began distributing data chips to the nearest delegates. "You'll find our formal withdrawal notices there, along with the termination of all treaties, trade agreements, and mutual defense pacts. Humanity is done with the Forum. The Peltharian trade minister, a being who resembled a floating mass of tentacles surrounding a central brain, spoke in a voice that dripped with condescension. "Ambassador, be reasonable. Your species is barely a century into space travel. You have 73 colony worlds, most of them marginal at best. Your economy depends on trade with forum members. Your technology is generations behind the elder races. This is suicide." Chung Wei's smile widened. "You're right about one thing. We are behind in technology. At least in the technology you know about." She pressed a button on her tablet. "I'm transmitting a data package to all delegations now. You might want to review it before you celebrate your victory here." Across the chamber, screens flickered to life. What they showed made the chaos intensify. Star charts, hundreds of them. New colonies, thousands of them. Fleet movements, military installations, research stations. All of it hidden, all of it unknown to the forum's extensive intelligence networks. "For the last 20 years, Chen Wei continued, her voice cutting through the noise, humanity has been preparing for this moment. We knew the forum was corrupt. We knew that power, not justice, determined outcomes here. So we planned accordingly. While you were watching our official colonies, we were settling hundreds more in unexplored regions. While you were monitoring our registered fleet movements, we were building shipyards in places you didn't even know existed. While you were confident in your technological superiority, our scientists were working on projects you can't even imagine." Chancellor Vexuth's skin had turned a sickly purple color. "This is a violation of dozens of foreign regulations. Undeclared colonies. Hidden military buildup. You have betrayed the trust of every species in this chamber." "Trust?" Chun Wei's laugh was sharp and bitter. "Like the trust you showed when you tried to steal our colony because of some ancient star chart? Like the trust shown by the 36 species who conspired with you before this session even began? No, Chancellor. We learned an important lesson from the forum. In galactic politics, there is no trust. There is only power." The Kraft military commander, a massive being covered in armored plates, stood with a sound like grinding stones. "You speak of power, human, but you are still weak. Even with your hidden colonies and secret fleets, you are no match for the combined might of the forum. This withdrawal is meaningless. We will simply take what we want from you." Chun Wei's expression went cold. "You're welcome to try. But I should mention one more thing. Those research projects I mentioned, one of them was quite successful. We've solved the problem of faster-than-light travel without using hyperspace gates." The chamber went dead silent. Every species in the galaxy depended on the ancient hyperspace gate network for interstellar travel. The gates had been built by a long-dead precursor race, and no one had ever figured out how to create new ones or replicate the technology. Control of the gates meant control of trade, of military movements, of everything that made galactic civilization function. "Impossible," breathed Representative Giara. "The greatest minds of the elder races have tried for millennia to crack that problem. Humans have been in space for barely a century." "Yes," Chen Wei agreed, "but we think differently than you do. We don't accept that something is impossible just because it's always been that way. And now we have something you need rather than the other way around. Which brings me to my final point." She looked around the chamber one last time. "Humanity is withdrawing from the forum, but we're not withdrawing from the galaxy. Our new colonies are open for trade on our terms. We'll negotiate treaties, alliances, and agreements with individual species who approach us honestly and fairly. But we will never again submit to the judgment of this corrupt body." She gathered her materials and turned to leave. Her aides fell in behind her. As they walked toward the exit, the chamber remained frozen in stunned silence. Then, just as they reached the door, the Peltharian minister called out, You're making a terrible mistake, Ambassador Chun. The galaxy is a dangerous place. Without the Forum's protection, humanity will be destroyed. Chun Wei paused and looked back over her shoulder. The galaxy is indeed dangerous, Minister, which is why we've spent 20 years preparing for this moment. You wanted to see if humanity could survive without the Forum? Her smile was predatory now. You're about to find out. But I suspect the real question is whether the Forum can survive without humanity. They left the chamber, leaving 300 species in chaos behind them. Within hours, the news would spread across the galaxy. Humanity had done the unthinkable. They had walked away from the only power structure the galaxy had known for 12,000 years. Some would call it madness. Some would call it suicide. But as Chen Wei boarded her ship and watched the Forum station shrink in the viewport, she felt nothing but relief. Humanity was finally free to chart its own course among the stars, and the galaxy would never be the same. The news of humanity's withdrawal spread through the galaxy like wildfire through dry grass. Within days, every inhabited world from the galactic core to the outer rim spirals knew what had happened. The reaction was exactly what Ambassador Chun Wei had predicted. Chaos. On the Varantine homeworld, High Chancellor Vexoth convened an emergency session of the Supremacy Council. The ornate chamber, carved from a single massive crystal millennia ago, had witnessed countless debates about war and peace, prosperity and disaster. But the beings gathered there had never faced anything quite like this. The humans are bluffing, Vexoth declared, his manipulator appendages gesturing sharply. They must be. No species survives outside the Forum. The economic sanctions alone will cripple them within a cycle. General Cormith, commander of the Varantine war fleets, wasn't so sure. He had been studying the data package the humans had released, and what he saw troubled him deeply. Chancellor, these star charts show colony placements in regions we didn't even know were habitable. Their survey capacity alone is decades ahead of what we believed possible. And these fleet positions. He manipulated a holographic display showing hundreds of red markers scattered across previously empty space. If these numbers are accurate, they have nearly as many military vessels as we do. And we're the third largest fleet in the Forum. Propaganda, Vexoth snapped. Inflated numbers to make themselves seem more powerful than they are. Perhaps, Cormith conceded. But what about this faster-than-light technology they claim? If that's real, it's not real. Vexoth's voice echoed through the crystal chamber. The precursor races couldn't do it. The elder species had been trying for thousands of years. A species that discovered fire barely 10,000 years ago certainly didn't solve it. But even as he spoke, reports were coming in that made his certainty waver. Human ships had been spotted moving between systems without using the hyperspace gates. At first, the Forum's intelligence agencies dismissed the reports as sensor errors or misidentifications. Then the sightings multiplied. A human cargo vessel appearing in the Sirius system without having passed through any nearby gates. A human cruiser detected in 3 different sectors within a single day, an impossible feat using conventional travel. The Zhen-Car banking networks were the first to feel the real impact. When they announced sanctions against all human accounts, they expected humanity to come crawling back to the negotiating table within weeks. Instead, human merchants simply stopped using Zhen-Car financial institutions entirely. They established their own banking networks, their own currency exchanges, their own trade clearinghouses. Within a month, 15 minor species had quietly begun using the human systems instead. Attracted by lower fees and faster transaction processing, the Peltharian trade consortium tried to organize a complete economic blockade. They controlled the largest merchant fleets in the galaxy and handled nearly 40% of all interstellar commerce. Surely the loss of such a massive trading partner would bring humanity to its knees. They announced that any vessel trading with human worlds would be blacklisted from Peltharian ports and shipping contracts. The response was swift and devastating. Humanity simply offered better terms, lower tariffs, faster shipping through their new FTL drives, access to resources from their hidden colonies in previously unreachable systems. Within 2 months, the Peltharian consortium had lost a quarter of their client species. The tentacled trade ministers held emergency meetings, their brain clusters pulsing with distress. This wasn't how it was supposed to work, but the real terror began when the Krath Dominion decided to test humanity's military capabilities. The Krath were the most feared warrior race in the Forum. Their concept of diplomacy consisting largely of agree with us or we'll destroy your homeworld. They had maintained their position through raw military might for 3,000 years, and they saw humanity's withdrawal as an opportunity to demonstrate what happened to species who defied the Forum's will. Fleet Commander Thekarin assembled a battle group of 50 warships, enough firepower to reduce a planet's surface to molten glass. His target was New Harmony, a human colony world in the outer reaches of the Orion Arm. According to Forum intelligence, it was lightly defended, home to about 2 million colonists. A perfect target to send a message. The Krath fleet emerged from hyperspace at the system's edge, weapons charging, shields at maximum. Thekarin expected to find perhaps a dozen human patrol craft, maybe a small orbital defense platform. What he found instead made his blood run cold. 40 human warships waited in formation around the planet. Not patrol craft. Full-sized battle cruisers, their hulls bearing the scars of extensive combat experience. And they hadn't just arrived. They had been waiting. Somehow, they had known the Krath were coming. All ships, battle formation. Thekarin roared. They may have numbers, but Krath warriors fear no enemy. His fleet surged forward, weapons firing. The humans didn't retreat. They didn't even seem concerned. What happened next would be discussed in military academies across the galaxy for decades to come. The human ships moved with a precision and coordination that seemed impossible. They didn't fight like the other species the Krath had faced, with brute force and overwhelming firepower. They fought with calculated efficiency, each ship covering others, their formation shifting like a living organism. When Krath vessels fired, the humans were already moving, their vessels dancing between the weapons' fire with impossible agility. And the humans began to shoot back. Their weapons were different from standard Forum technology. Instead of plasma cannons and particle beams, they used something the Krath had never encountered. Missiles that seemed to think for themselves, adjusting their course mid-flight to intercept evasive maneuvers. Energy weapons that bypassed shields entirely, striking directly at hull armor. And their point defense systems were so effective that Krath missiles simply couldn't reach their targets. Within 20 minutes, Thekarin had lost 15 ships. Not a single human vessel had been destroyed. His pride warred with his survival instinct, and finally, survival won. Retreat. All ships fall back to the hyperspace gate. But the humans had anticipated that too. 3 more human battle groups emerged from behind the system's moons, cutting off the escape route. Thekarin's fleet was surrounded. He prepared for the final assault, for the human ships to close in and finish what they'd started. Instead, a communication channel opened. A human face appeared on his screen, a woman with steel-gray hair and cold eyes. Commander Thekarin, I am Admiral Sarah Okonchuo of the United Earth Space Navy. You came here to attack our colony. We could destroy your entire fleet right now, but we won't. Instead, you're going to take a message back to the Forum. Thekarin's pride burned, but he managed to speak. What message? Tell them that humanity doesn't want war, but we won't run from it either. Tell them that any attack on our colonies will be met with overwhelming force. Tell them that the old rules don't apply anymore. And tell them, Admiral Okonkwo's smile was thin and sharp, that they're very lucky we're more merciful than they are. The human ships parted, creating a corridor to the hyperspace gate. Thakarin's damaged fleet limped through it, their sensors showing the human vessels, tracking them every meter of the way. It was the most humiliating moment of his long military career, but it was also a revelation. Humanity wasn't just bluffing. They were genuinely more powerful than anyone had believed possible. The recording of the battle reached the forum within hours. The delegates watched in stunned silence as the Krath fleet, the terror of 3 sectors, was systematically dismantled by human forces. The implications were staggering. If humanity could defeat the Krath that easily, what else were they capable of? Chancellor Vexov called for an immediate military response, a full forum fleet to crush humanity before they became an even greater threat. But the other delegates hesitated. The Krath had been humiliated, but not destroyed. The humans had shown restraint, mercy even. That was unusual in galactic politics, where defeated enemies were usually annihilated to prevent future threats. Some of the smaller species began to whisper among themselves. They remembered being bullied by the forum's powerful members, being forced to accept unfavorable treaties, watching helplessly as their resources were claimed by elder races with dubious legal justifications. They remembered because they were still living it. And now, humanity was offering an alternative. Fair trade, honest negotiation, protection from the very powers that had oppressed them for centuries. The first defection came 3 weeks after the Battle of New Harmony. The Kelthani Republic, a small mining civilization from the Sagittarius Arm, formally announced they were leaving the Forum and signing a mutual defense treaty with humanity. 2 days later, the Assyrian Collective followed. Then the Draxi Confederation. Like cracks spreading through ice, the Forum's unity began to fracture. In her office, aboard the human diplomatic vessel, Ambassador Chun Wei watched the reports with satisfaction. She had spent 7 years in the Forum, 7 years learning its weaknesses, identifying the species who were tired of being pushed around, building quiet relationships that were now bearing fruit. The withdrawal had been calculated from the beginning. Humanity had never intended to stand alone. They had intended. The emergency coalition assembled in secret, far from the Forum's official chambers. 7 species, the true powers behind the Galactic Forum, met in a hidden station deep in neutral space. The Vorantines, the Genkar, the Peltharians, the Krath, the ancient Ythari Collective, the enigmatic Sul Concordance, and the militaristic Draven Empire. Together, they controlled over 60% of the galaxy's resources, military might, and economic power. High Chancellor Vexov addressed the assembly, his voice steady despite his inner turmoil. The situation is clear. Humanity has fractured Forum unity. 23 species have now withdrawn to join their alliance. If we don't act decisively, the entire galactic order will collapse. The Ythari representative, an ancient being whose species had been spacefaring when most others were still in their primitive ages, spoke in a voice like wind through dead leaves. We have faced rebellions before. Upstart species who thought they could challenge the established order. They all failed. They all came crawling back, or they were destroyed. Humanity will be no different. But Chiara of the Genkar wasn't so certain. Her crystalline form reflected the worried faces of the other delegates. The others were predictable. They fought with emotion, with pride, with desperation. The humans are different. Everything they've done has been calculated, planned years in advance. They withdrew from the Forum, knowing exactly how we would react. They had all eyes ready before they even made their announcement. They baited the Krath into attacking and were prepared for it. This isn't a rebellion born of desperation. This is a strategy. The Draven military coordinator, a being that resembled living metal in a vaguely humanoid shape, slammed a fist on the table. Strategy means nothing against superior firepower. We assemble our combined fleets and crush them. Make an example of Earth itself, if necessary. And risk turning them into martyrs? The Sul representative's words floated through the chamber in visible patterns of light. The smaller species are watching. If we annihilate humanity, we prove that the Forum rules through terror, not law. We'll have a dozen more rebellions within the year. Vexith raised his manipulators for silence. Then we need to be more subtle. We don't destroy them. We strangle them. Cut off their supply lines. Infiltrate their colonies. Turn their new allies against them. Make them fail on their own, so the galaxy sees that breaking from the Forum leads only to ruin. The plan was approved unanimously. Over the following months, the Seven Powers began their campaign. Gen-Car financial networks quietly manipulated currency markets, trying to destabilize human trade. Peltharian merchant vessels were secretly armed and ordered to raid human cargo ships, then blame it on pirates. Varantini intelligence operatives infiltrated human colonies, spreading propaganda and trying to incite rebellion. The craft deployed covert military assets to strategic locations, ready to strike at vulnerable targets. At first, it seemed to work. A human mining colony on Kepler 442 reported food shortages after supply ships mysteriously disappeared. On New Carthage, protests erupted after rumors spread that the human government was hoarding resources. 3 human freighters were destroyed by pirates in the span of 2 weeks. The Forum's propaganda networks broadcast constant messages about the chaos and suffering in human space, warning other species about the cost of leaving the Forum's protection. But then something unexpected happened. The humans adapted. Not slowly, not reactively, but with the same calculated precision they had shown from the beginning. It was as if they had anticipated every move the Forum powers would make. When Gen-Car financial manipulation destabilized currency exchanges, humanity simply abandoned traditional currency altogether in their trade networks. They implemented a new system based on resource sharing and mutual credit that was immune to external market manipulation. 36 species joined the system within weeks, attracted by its stability and transparency. When supply ships were attacked, humanity's new FTL drives allowed them to reroute around danger zones faster than the raiders could adapt. They also began arming their merchant vessels, not with standard weapons, but with defensive systems so advanced that attacking a human freighter became a suicide mission for pirates. When Varantine operatives tried to spread dissent in human colonies, they were systematically identified and captured. It turned out that human intelligence services were far more effective than anyone had realized. The captured spies revealed something disturbing. Humanity had known about the infiltration attempts before they even began. They had been monitoring Forum communications, breaking encryption that was supposed to be unbreakable, and feeding false information to make their enemies overconfident. Captain James Morrison stood in the interrogation room aboard the human intelligence vessel Nightingale, looking down at the Varantine operative they had captured on New Harmony. The alien's multiple eyes showed fear despite its attempt at defiance. "You've been very helpful," Morrison said calmly. "Your intelligence network gave you information about weak points in our colony defenses. Locations where protests would be most effective. Names of colonists who might be sympathetic to Forum propaganda. All very detailed, very specific." The Varantine remained silent, but its skin color shifted to a nervous orange. Morrison smiled. "The problem is, we gave you that information. Every bit of it was false, designed to make you waste resources on operations that would fail. Your handlers back in Varantine space think you're successfully undermining our colonies. In reality, you've accomplished nothing except helping us identify the entire Forum intelligence network. The operative's color went pale gray. That's impossible. Our encryption is adequate by galactic standards, Morrison interrupted. But humanity developed code-breaking as an art form long before we reached the stars. During our world wars, we built machines to crack codes that were supposed to be unbreakable. We've had centuries to refine those techniques. Your supposedly secure communications might as well be written in plain text. He stood up, preparing to leave. You can tell your superiors something when you're exchanged back to them. Tell them that humanity didn't spend 20 years preparing to leave the Forum just to be undermined by the same old tricks. Tell them we're always 3 steps ahead. And tell them that we know about Operation Stranglehold. The Vorontine's eyes went wide with genuine terror. Morrison's revelation was no bluff. Human intelligence had indeed penetrated the Forum's most secure communications. In a hidden facility on Earth, teams of cryptographers and AI systems worked around the clock, monitoring every major communication network in the galaxy. They knew about the secret coalition. They knew about the plans to strangle humanity economically and politically. And they had prepared countermeasures for everything. But the humans weren't content with just defending themselves. Ambassador Chun Wei had learned during her years in the Forum that in galactic politics, you either grew stronger or you became prey. Humanity chose to grow stronger. In the Zephyr system, human engineers had discovered something remarkable. The system's asteroid belt contained rare minerals that could revolutionize shield technology, making defensive barriers 10 times more effective. Rather than keeping the discovery secret, humanity offered to share the technology with any species willing to trade fairly. Dozens of smaller civilizations accepted the offer, gaining access to defensive capabilities that had previously been available only to the richest. Forum members and human research stations scattered across unexplored regions. Scientists made breakthrough after breakthrough. New medical treatments that could cure diseases that had plagued certain species for millennia. Agricultural techniques that could make barren worlds fertile. Energy systems more efficient than anything the galaxy had seen. And unlike the Forum's elder races, who hoarded their technological advantages, humanity shared these discoveries with their allies. The effect was transformative. Species that had been barely surviving on marginal worlds suddenly found themselves prospering. Civilizations that had been bullied by more powerful neighbors now had the means to defend themselves. The human alliance wasn't just an alternative to the Forum. It was proving to be better in every measurable way. On the Peltharian homeworld, Trade Minister Velthan watched the reports with growing dread. His manipulator tentacles writhed in agitation as he reviewed the latest economic data. The consortium was hemorrhaging clients, losing trillions in revenue every cycle. Entire trade routes that had been profitable for centuries were now abandoned in favor of human-managed alternatives. How are they doing this? He demanded of his analysts. They're one species. One world. How are they outcompeting an economic network that spans thousands of systems? The answer, when it came, was simple but devastating. Efficiency. The Forum's economic systems had grown bloated and corrupt over millennia. Bribes, favoritism, and bureaucratic inefficiency added massive overhead costs to every transaction. The humans, starting from scratch, had built lean, automated systems that operated at a fraction of the cost. They could offer better prices, faster service, and more reliable delivery than anyone else. But more than that, they actually cared about their trading partners. Forum merchants treated smaller species as resources to be exploited. Human traders built relationships, learned about Thai. The war began not with declarations or formal announcements, but with silence. The Forum's communication networks went dark for exactly 17 minutes. When they came back online, Every major hyperspace gate in Forum-controlled space had been locked down, preventing any vessel from entering or leaving. It was a move of desperation, an attempt to prevent more species from defecting to the human alliance. But the Forum had forgotten something crucial. They needed the gates. Humanity didn't. Within hours, human vessels were moving freely through space, while Forum ships sat trapped at locked gates, unable to travel. Trade ground to a halt. Military vessels couldn't reach their patrol routes. Panic spread through Forum worlds as supply chains collapsed. The Seven Powers had intended the lockdown to isolate humanity, but they had only succeeded in isolating themselves. Admiral Okonkwo watched the chaos unfold from the bridge of the UEN's Defiance, humanity's newest and most advanced warship. The vessel hung in space above New Harmony, its sleek form bristling with weapons that represented decades of secret research and development. Around it, the human defense fleet maintained perfect formation, waiting. "Admiral, we're receiving distress calls from 36 Forum worlds," her communications officer reported. "Medical emergencies, food shortages, equipment failures. They're begging for help." Okungwo considered the request carefully. This was the moment that would define humanity's future relationship with the galaxy. They could ignore the pleas, let the Forum suffer the consequences of its own actions. Or they could show the galaxy what the human alliance truly stood for. "Dispatch humanitarian vessels to all requesting systems," she ordered. "Medical supplies, food, repair equipment, whatever they need. And make it clear that we're offering help freely, with no conditions attached." Her first officer looked surprised. "Admiral, these are Forum worlds. Some of them voted to sanction us." "I know," Okonkwo replied, "which is exactly why we need to help them. We're not the Forum. We don't punish civilians for the mistakes of their leaders." A human relief effort began immediately. Ships carrying medical supplies, food synthesizers, and emergency equipment appeared at Forum worlds across the galaxy. They arrived through hyperspace jumps that bypassed the locked gates entirely, a stark demonstration of humanity's technological advantage. But more importantly, they came without demands, without conditions, without the expectation of repayment. On the Satarian homeworld, a planet of amphibious beings who had voted for human sanctions, the population watched in shock as human medical teams set up emergency clinics and began treating a plague that had broken out during the gate lockdown. The teams worked alongside local doctors, sharing techniques and technology freely, asking nothing in return. One of the Satarian physicians, a female named Kelsara, approached the human team leader after a long shift. "Why are you doing this? Our government voted against you. We supported the sanctions. You owe us nothing." The human doctor, a tired-looking man named Chun, smiled wearily. "We're doing this because people are suffering, and we can help. That's all the reason we need. Your government made choices we disagree with, but you didn't. The people dying from this plague didn't vote for sanctions. They're just people trying to live their lives, same as anyone else." Kelsara's throat sac pulsed with emotion. The Forum would never do this. They would demand concessions, political favors, economic agreements. "We're not the Forum," Chun said simply. "We're trying to build something better." That conversation, recorded and broadcast across Forum space, did more to undermine the Seven Powers than any military victory could have achieved. Across hundreds of worlds, citizens began questioning why their leaders had opposed humanity in the first place. If these were the monsters the Forum warned about, why were they the ones providing help while Forum leadership remained silent? In the secret coalition chamber, the Seven Powers faced an impossible situation. High Chancellor Vexeth had aged visibly in the past weeks, his skin taking on a grayish tint. The gate lockdown was supposed to strengthen our position. Instead, we've handed humanity a propaganda victory. 63 more species have formally withdrawn from the forum. At this rate, there won't be a forum left to save. Then we use military force, the Draden coordinator insisted. We still have superior numbers. A coordinated strike on Earth itself. Decapitate their leadership. Show the galaxy that rebellion has consequences. But the Ithari Elder was already shaking its head. Our intelligence reports are clear. Humanity has military installations we knew nothing about, weapon systems we don't understand, and allies who would come to their defense. An attack on Earth would trigger a war we're not certain we can win. Giara's crystalline form refracted the chamber light in patterns of despair. Then what do? We can't fight them militarily. We can't compete with them economically. We can't match them diplomatically. Every move we make strengthens their position and weakens ours. The Sul representatives' light patterns shifted to a color none of them had seen before, a hue that spoke of profound resignation. Perhaps it's time we considered the unthinkable. Perhaps it's time we opened negotiations. The chamber erupted in protests, but beneath the outrage, there was a current of reluctant agreement. The forum was dying, and everyone in that room knew it. The only question was whether they would let it die with dignity or watch it be torn apart. The negotiations began in neutral space, aboard a station built specifically for the purpose. It was neither a forum facility nor a human one, but something new. Ambassador Chun Wei led the human delegation, while the 7 powers each sent their highest-ranking officials. The first session lasted 16 hours and accomplished almost nothing. The forum representatives came expecting to dictate terms. The humans came prepared to build a new framework for galactic governance. You're asking us to surrender everything the forum has built over 12 millennia, Vexoth protested. To tear down an institution that brought order to the chaos of galactic civilization. Chun Wei's expression was patient but firm. No, Chancellor. We're asking you to recognize that the forum has become exactly what it was created to prevent. A tool of oppression by the powerful against the weak. The elder races use it to maintain their dominance, not to ensure justice. That needs to change. And who makes you the judge of what's just? The Draven coordinator demanded. Your species is an infant by galactic standards. What gives you the right to lecture civilizations that were building star empires when your ancestors lived in caves? Experience, Chun Wei replied calmly. Humanity spent thousands of years making every mistake a civilization can make. We had empires built on slavery and oppression. We had wars that nearly destroyed our world. We had systems of government that claimed to serve justice while enforcing tyranny. We learned, painfully and slowly, that power without accountability corrupts everything it touches. The forum is corrupt, and deep down, all of you know it. The truth of her words hung in the air like a physical presence. The Ithari elder finally spoke, its ancient voice heavy with admission. What do you propose? Over the following months, a new framework emerged. Not a replacement for the forum, but a transformation of it. The Galactic Council of Free Worlds would maintain many of the forum's functions. Dispute resolution, trade regulation, mutual defense. But it would operate on fundamentally different principles. Every member species would have equal voting rights, regardless of age, size, or military power. Decisions would require consensus, not simple majorities that allowed the powerful to outvote the weak. Economic systems would be transparent and auditable. Military alliances would be voluntary, not enforced. Most importantly, any species could leave at any time without punishment or sanction. This is madness, the Peltharian minister protested. Equal votes for species with 3 colony worlds and species with 3,000. How can that possibly work? The same way it works for humanity, Chen Wei explained. On Earth, we have nations with millions of citizens and nations with thousands. In our global assembly, Each nation gets one vote. It's not perfect, but it's far better than a system where the largest nations simply take what they want from the smaller ones. But that means we lose our advantages, Vexith said bluntly. The elder races have spent millennia building our power and influence. You're asking us to give that up. We're asking you to compete fairly, Chunwei corrected. If your civilizations are truly superior, you'll thrive under these rules. If your dominance was built only on coercion and rigged systems, then yes, you'll lose it. But that's not an advantage worth keeping. The negotiations nearly collapsed a dozen times. But each time they did, something would happen to remind everyone why change was necessary. A forum patrol would be caught extorting bribes from a minor species. A Genkar bank would be exposed for predatory lending practices. A Vorantine mining operation would be revealed to be using slave labor from conquered worlds. Every revelation proved Chunwei's point. The old system was rotten to its core. Finally, after 6 months of intense debate, the agreement was reached. The Galactic Council of Free Worlds would officially replace the Forum. The transition would take 5 years, allowing time for existing treaties and agreements to be renegotiated under the new framework. The 7 powers would retain Thai,